to the last speaker of the day before our Q&A session, and that comes from Dr. Brian Arnall, talking about, but what of course, nitrogen.
What of course, that's what I do, right? All right, well, I appreciate everybody being here today. I've enjoyed being in the chat today. It's been a good back and forth, and I have some burning questions for some of our presenters later also. But with that, I want to run through this fairly quickly. We've done a lot of work of recent on wheat, and many of you have probably already seen me visit about this. You can actually see many of the data is going to be presented today is already in blog form on my OSU MPK. We're in the midst of writing 2 manuscripts to try to get them out there. And I've done a longer version of this talk for Kansas Ag retailers and others. But getting down into the meat and potatoes of it. Let's see here. There we go. So no matter what I say, keep this in mind that if you don't have your pH right, if you don't have your potassium, phosphorus under control, then a lot of what I'm talking about is not nearly as relevant. I'm making assumptions when we're going into this that we're taking care of the little things. We're taking care of IPM. We're taking care of weed management. And we're taking care of our soil pH, because all those do limit the crop's ability to respond and utilize nitrogen to its fullest. This graph right here is one I've been showing often lately. I think it's a great representation. It actually comes from Dr. Silva, our small grains extension specialist, dissertation work, and she had some of this discussed last week in the wheat session. But as a soils specialist, this value really shocked me in that I always envisioned when I thought of plant physiology that by the time of flowering, a wheat plant had taken up most of the nitrogen it was going to need and is more about translocation of the nitrogen taken up into the grain. But in all accounts, it was really that we've only taken up 70 to 80% of the total nitrogen by flowering, by anthesis, that was going to end up in the plant overall. So in this case, you're looking at a 60 to 70 bushel wheat crop, and you still have about 100 pounds of nitrogen to take up during that last 30 days or so when you go through anthesis and grain fill, which really bodes against pre-plant if you think about how we do wheat. Because think about this, if what does it take to make good wheat in Oklahoma? It takes rain. We have a good wheat crop when we have good and reliable moisture. How do we lose nitrogen out of the system? It's moisture. So if we have all of our nitrogen up front, or even a majority of our nitrogen up front pre-plant, and it's sitting there from September all the way through when we need it in April, if we have a good year for good biomass production and good tiller production and good yield production, then we've probably lost a lot of it due to leaching, whether it's in depth or down side slope. So if we really want to look at it, I want to talk about this as a Stanford equation, is the base equation of how we get all of our nitrogen. It's fertilizer rate equals the nitrogen in the crop taken up and removed by the crop minus nitrogen in the soil divided by efficiency factor. Think of that this way. Yield goal nitrogen recommendations, the yield goal times 2 for wheat minus soil test, crop in, yield goal. How much yield am I going to have? Times 2. That 2 is the nitrogen in a bushel plus in a factor, because there's not 2 pounds of N per bushel, 2 pounds of N in a bushel of wheat. There's 1.5, 1.4. So that means the remainder is a fudge factor. So we're bringing in nitrogen in the crop and efficiency into that 2 value minus soil test gets us soil. So the 4 R's, how do we get things improved? It's getting the right source, the right rate, the right time, the right place. Well, with wheat, I think a lot of what we've got that can really be tweaked is not so much a source. There is some source. It's not so much a placement. There is some placement we can do, but it's the rate and the time. If we can move it from pre-plant to when the crop actually needs it, if we go up, this is September, August, October, November. This right here is Fe 6. We're applying all of our nitrogen before it's taken up 100 pounds to get through the rest of it. We need to be in that exponential uptake and growth curve to get our biggest efficiency. And if we go into rate, do we have a clue what we're going to make when we put the seed in the ground? Not a clue. So the further we get into season, the more we understand about our yield potential and what we can make. So this is some of our recent work. I was able to bring in the results from multiple trials from Dr. Ron's program and my program, looking over the last 6 years. I was able to evaluate 33 trials. That's trial locations. So if I have a trial out in 3 locations, that would be 3 site years. So if I do it two years in a row, that's 6 site years. So this is 33 site years. Of those 33 that I was able to evaluate that had both all nitrogen pre-plant versus all nitrogen in season, that's what I was looking at here. 33 of them had an in response. So I threw out those 2 that didn't respond to nitrogen because they don't tell us anything. If you look at the pre-plant and the in season, of those 31 locations, 2, the pre-plant out yielded the in season application. We put all the nitrogen in sometime in the spring. 2, one of those was our small hand plots, which we would talk about later, which was in El Reno, and we don't know why. It was just better. And one of them was due to the methodology in the study that caused it to actually be worse. Protein never did in-season protein or did pre-plant have a better protein content than in-season. If we look at in-season, now all these are applied around Feeks 5 or that point where you start getting erect growth on through about Feeks 7. So that's getting well past hollow stem. 7 out of the 31 times grain yield was better with in-season application than pre-plant statistically. Numerically, it was more than that, but I'm talking about statistically at an alpha 0.05, meaning we're 95% confident that that answer was true. 21 out of the 33 times protein was better. So if we start looking at this, we start looking at, am I really going to all the time do better on yield if I wait? No. But you got a 25% chance on if you're waiting on nitrogen to have a better yield. So that's better than your 6% chance. So grain yield, I'm a bit of a wash. Protein, though, especially those years that we can have a better protein or have an opportunity for protein premiums, 70% of the time almost, I had a significant, statistically significant increase in grain protein by waiting to closer to hollow stem. So if I'm going to Vegas, all my money's got to be on in season. I've only got a 6% chance of a positive ROI on pre-plant when I've got all that opportunity on in season. And I'm not talking a split. I'm talking all in season versus all pre-plant. Now I'm going to break down and talk a little bit about each study. I like to break down and talk about what we learned in each study. So this is the 2N rate. Using ammonium nitrate because we want to look at source, and we'll get to that later. I don't want to care about source. I want to look at the crop's ability. We had multiple rates. We had a split application of 45-45 versus a one-time shot of 90 versus a one-time shot of 180 pounds of N. All those going to say that we wanted to see this growth curve if we over-apply, knowing that our optimum is going to be about 120 pounds of nitrogen. 180 was going to be out the max. We had this over 4 site years. And the winner was that, you know what, folks, if you want to apply 180 pounds when you need about 100 to 110, it doesn't matter when you apply it. You've over applied to such a level, it doesn't freaking matter. So just give up and just throw it all out there, just over apply and be hugely inefficient. It works that way. That's a safe low risk or low yield risk bet, but your efficiency's in the tank. Your pounds, you're paying more for that nitrogen than you would by waiting for it in season. Your cost is higher because you get so poor of efficiencies. What did surprise me in this is that between the 45-45 split, meaning 45 pre and 45 pounds sometime in season versus all 90, I really thought that 45-45 split was going to be a good one. We out yielded it twice, which really shocked me. The 90 all at one time was better than 45-45. It just, we run it out. When we put it up front, we have losses. There's just no two around it. And protein was always better with that one-time in-season application. So we just got to look at it, do we even care about splitting? This tells me I want to put DAP or MAP in furrow, got to walk away for a while, see what I got going. Rate by time. Now, this study was put out by Dr. Ron's crew, they used urea. They had 3 timings: early, pre, and an in season, basically before joining, that stem elongation, or that when the plant's becoming erect and more upright growth time. Of their 4 site years on this one, pre-plant was better once, and in season was significantly better once. When you look over here, grain yield, same, less, better. And so we only had one significant difference by waiting to this one. This one right here, this Lahoma, a good question. This is all grain only wheat. This is not grazing wheat, although we've got a lot of work saying that we need to wait on grazing wheat to a degree also, or we can get it. This Lahoma site was one of those where the protocol had a specific date it had to go out in, X date. The students went out the night before. It rained 1.25 inches, and this is in mid-March. It rained about 1.25 inches at Lahoma. They went out and spread urea on the soil surface, basically standing on top of mud, and it got up into the 70s and low 80s for the next 2 weeks without any rain. So they applied it at the worst possible time to do in-season urea application. Of course, they were going to lose it. But it's also still a great story that, application timing based upon weather is important. We'll get to that. The on-farm YP, so small plot studies. Many of you had these on your own farms or knew of them. We were putting out 20 or 30 of these a year, harvesting as many as we could. Last year, we got wiped out. Everything south of I-40 got frozen out. But in the end, we ended up we lost 60% of all of our locations over the 2 years, but we had quite a few locations. And you see that our El Reno location, really high yield. We had a better grain yield from the pre-plant than we did in season. So there's our one, and that was real. Why it was on this field, we don't know. It could have been cultivar. We're wanting to get in and dig more into the actual cultivar or variety impact. But all the others, Byron, Lake Carl-Bacco, Byron, we had significant grain, but all those significant proteins. So we had 3 significant grain, and the rest of those had significant protein by waiting to a holostem or pre-holostem application. The enriched strip, and I want to get into this last bit of conversation. This last study kind of started all the other studies. It's been one of my longest and was established due to the enriched strip. I've been telling folks since the day I was in grad school that we got to do enriched strips, but I've always been kind of an agronomic guess about how long can we wait after they show up. So they show up, and I've been telling folks, guys, get out there within 30 to 45 days. Otherwise, I'm afraid we're going to start losing yield. That was just me guessing. I had no research or data to say that was wrong or right. So a couple of years ago, we established a trial that really waited, where one plot received nitrogen pre-plant and everything else went unfertilized until that one plot showed up, or basically the enriched strip showed up, meaning the rest of the field was deficient. And then we start applying nitrogen, and we use, in this case, ammonium nitrate, start in 06, just to see how long we could wait, up to it was 63 days after visual difference, and that's growing days. So often that means it has to have a mean daily temperature above about 40 degrees. So that meant this could be 90 to 100 calendar days after we applied the first visual difference. In this case, it was a significant period of time, because you can see even that first one was already deficient, and the later ones had a lot more green growth to them. I started in 2016. This is application dates. It's kind of interesting to see from this is harvest year 17, harvest year 20. The color corresponds to the month, and this is when we applied the first. So this is when we had the first visual difference. We started in November, January, and December, March, February. So we've got all kinds of different start dates, and we have different end dates from February all the way through May. So this pink is May, but most of our applications are coming in February. This dark blue, March has a whole lot of them, and April. And know that we hit holostem around mid-March. So mid to early March is when we're going to holostem almost all of these site years. This is all grain only. Majority of these fields are planted in the first 2 weeks of October, planting date from October 2nd through about October 20th on average. For the majority of them. And so majority of these are in there. A lot of this is double stop. We have some AgriPro varieties and a little bit of Ruby Lee. to try to summarize all that massive amount of data, bring it into this. And just want you to know, so this is statistically, if I compare an in-season application to the grain yield and protein of the pre-plant, this pink means that it was different in yield negatively. The unfertilized check was significantly less in grain yield than the pre-plant. So that's what we want to see, a nitrogen response. Green means this plot was significantly better than the check, and this is yield and protein. So if we see this, we see a lot of greens happening in this time frame, anywhere between 0 days after difference to 63. So in this Stillwater location, we go 63 days of growing days of deficiency, and we have our best yield and protein. Now, once we start getting late March and getting into April, we start seeing negative yields. You cannot wait until you're at flag leaf to put down your first nitrogen. It's just going to kill you. But a lot of these green are happening at hollow stem or after. But all this yellow means it was the same as pre-plant. The same as pre-plant. We don't have reds in this time frame. We don't have reds in January, February, or March. The only time we have these reds are in late April and early May. One more. So that's ammonium nitrate. People say, that's ammonium nitrate. You're not getting a good idea of what happens with the stuff we have to use, which is going to be urea. So we've also got right next to those studies, we've done the exact same study with urea so that we can start looking at this. We've got dozens and dozens of applications now of urea and ammonium nitrate. Overall results were the same. Didn't matter. Now, we've learned a lot from the urea applications, like don't put it on a wet soil. That's not necessarily a game changer, but don't put it on a wet soil when it's not going to rain for 3 weeks. We already knew that, but we go out. This is also timed. The same results. My key points I want to take. Wheat is highly resilient, can endure nitrogen stress for a significant period of time and fully recover in our environment. Delaying all nitrogen until Feeks 5, Feeks 7. So when you start getting erect growth, then past hollow stem, that period between hollow stem and early boot, result in the greatest return in yield and protein. Not saying wait that long, but saying it's better to delay nitrogen applications to avoid bad weather than put it on when you don't need to. Don't get in a rush in January because you think you got to. You don't have to. Wait until the weather's right. Wait until you know more. We're going into a significant in-depth research right now to look at the impact of root and shoot ratio on delayed in. There's a ton of research that shows in brassica, if brassica is limited on nitrogen early, it makes more root. I've heard a lot of farmers and people tell me in the past, when our soils are if we get a good stand and it dries out, that wheat will chase water and get a really good root. We see it in corn, we see it in sorghum, we see it in soybeans. Every indication is it might be the same thing in nitrate. So are we making a plant that has a better root to shoot ratio, meaning we got bigger roots to chase more water and more nitrogen? I'll tell you, at harvest, our plants are more compact. We have bigger heads. We have smaller tillers. This also goes against tiller management, but there's a lot of work in Oklahoma that says tiller management is not nearly as important here as it is on the East Coast with like Phil Needham, those guys out there, and in Maryland and Virginia. It's just not that big of a deal for us. Getting a good, healthy plant to harvest is. Take home on wheat, moving nitrogen application closer to peak uptake is increasing profitability. While we can wait till well after hollow stem, the real story is not to get in a rush to apply when conditions are just so. Wait for when it's good to fertilize. Make your application based upon efficiency of the fertilizer applied, not when you think you need to. Soils are wet, no rain, don't go out there. It's not too late to put out your enriched strips now. In fact, there's plenty of time. Put out your enriched strips and just see what happens. You don't know if you need nitrogen unless the plant tells you. Just a couple minutes on some cool new work we're doing with sorghum. Effectively the same thing. Everybody knows you don't plant sorghum on the best ground. You tend to plant sorghum where you can't grow corn. So, maybe reduce some of the inputs or delay some of that until you got a good crop to invest in. I know Dr. Lofton's sitting there is like rolling his eyes at me, but but we're going to play along with this. So delayed timing, basically work at the timing of 21 days after planting up to 84 days after planting on application. A lot of this is well after boot right here and into heading. We have significantly impacted heading dates when we have a nitrogen deficiency and delay nitrogen by 1 week easy. By delaying nitrogen in a significantly delayed and significantly deficient system, you will delay heading by about a week. This is kind of cool. So if there's our unfertilized check, there's our pre-plant. This year, the pre-plant was shorter, had deficiencies developing around boot. But the same rate as you go, we have a taller plant. We have more green. And out here, this is, you see the leaves recover. This plot looked exactly like this plant just 2 weeks before, but we fertilized it and the green came in. The data off of that site is actually this one right here, the Perkins, where we see the pre-plant right here, the 0 pre-plant cut 65 bushel. But if we waited to 42, 49 days after planting, it was 75 bushel. While not statistically different, it was pretty close. But the 42 and 49 did better than both this plot and these plots out here. The 56 still did better than the later. So Perkins was shooting that 40 days after planting. Up here at Lahoma, a little bit drier. We see that this range right here, the 21 to about the 42 day time frame, is a really good time frame to be getting nitrogen on at those locations, doing just as good as the pre-plant, if not better. That about 80, 90 bushel, everything's going there. Waiting past 60 is getting a little bit too much for my taste. Lake Carl Blackwell, at that location, we had lower yields, we had poor stands, but we see around that 42 day time frame, we start losing yields, although it's not statistical. This Alva, this last location, we'll throw that out there, that was double crop. That was double crop in Alva, and after this date right here, it stopped raining. So on the double crop Alva, the pre-plant really showed its needs, and we're going to play more with this double crop. But I would just stick with a full season, saying, you know what, we can wait till we get a stand. And if I'm applying anywhere between 2 to 3 weeks after planting, I'm extremely comfortable. I could even wait a little bit more than that. A lot of this stuff I'm getting and is really confusing to some. I like this thought, doubt the conventional wisdom unless you can verify it with reason and experiment. Conventional wisdom was we can't wait that late in wheat. We cannot wait till after Fe 6. And I thought that the first year I saw the data, I thought it was wrong. The second year I saw the data, I questioned it. I've got 4 years of the same results, multiple weathers. We go wide swings in temperature and rainfall and environments, and it keeps telling me the same thing. Sorghum, I'm curious to find out where this goes. So with that, again, enriched strips, you see it on the back, enriched strips, put them out. It won't hurt you to put out enriched strips to find out what's going to happen in your wheat crop. Might save you some money or make you some money. $10 per acre a year, enriched strip, just by looking at it. With that, I have, that's the end of my slide deck. There is my contact information. Again, a lot of this stuff is on my blog and will be coming out even more so.
Well, thank you, Brian. We'll go ahead and, start the Q&A session. You can ask some questions to, Seth and Bradley, Brian, Highland, Dorvar, any of them. We've had some really good discussion in the chat talking about lime and variable rate lime and Pell source and stuff like that. And I encourage that to keep going. You guys can chime in on the voice or keep going in the chat function as well. One thing I did want to get back to, Mike asked a question during Seth and Bradley's presentation talking about economics. You guys did see some yield benefit, particularly with just the upfront fertility managed plots. Did you guys look or have you looked at the economics of that, or is that still kind of to come?
So I think some of that's still to come. We do want to look at economics with the foliar products. So we're in the process of getting a couple of those actual prices per gallon. From the range, we're typically thinking you're going to see these products run to $10 to $14 per gallon. It's also you have to think about the use rates. Where a lot of these products we're putting out 1 gallon per acre. So if we're not seeing huge yield benefits, I hesitate to say that we're going to see an economic difference for those. But yes, we are going to look at that.
Okay, and Brian, there's some questions regarding, and I know this one's been asked a lot about in-season liquid or UAN application. What's acceptable injury? What's acceptable on an in-season liquid application for sorghum and wheat?
So, by the way, Dane has some of the best questions coming through, and we need to keep hitting him. He needs to ask more on these chat. He's got some great questions and thoughts. But Dane, so I expect very similar as I do with UAN as urea. In fact, if I'm streaming on UAN, I think it will be better than urea. We have a lot of work going out this year that will really look at UAN versus urea streamed on, safe-in it, all that stuff, looking at the environments on that. So we're doing that, but I expect the same as urea as UAN. I really do. The split application, so if you're in conventional till, I'm fine with the 1-pass herbicide and nitrogen. I do not like it in no-till. You just get too much UAN on that residue. So I don't mind heating up the herbicide, but I'm not going to put a whole lot of on in that 1-pass because you just get too much bound up in that stubble. On the flip side, if you have that capability to get on the soil and the plant, it's fine. I have sprayed with herbicide 90 to 100 pounds of nitrogen. If it's not too hot outside, I'm not getting damage, but you don't get herbicide activity unless you're warm. So you're kind of mixed there. You do take a ding. I typically don't go more than like 10 or 15 gallons. It's sometimes, if the weather's right, maybe 20 gallons with herbicide, but I'm typically sticking to about 10 gallons. So 30 pounds of nitrogen in that 1-pass system. And I do like the idea of getting some in the fall with a 1-pass herbicide application that coming back, or early spring that coming back later in the season and bumping it up with streamed on around that joining time. Also, we've got Matt Johnson on for the sorghum stuff is ammonium nitrate, but we already have it in the works where we're going to have broadcast urea, broadcast UAN, streamed on UAN and ammonium nitrate to start looking at impact of burn. Lofton loves talking about, how much burn are we going to get? We don't know. So we're going to look at broadcasting UAN and streamed on. And we had some of that this year, but we happened to put it right in the bottom where in Alva, it drowned out. I don't know how the heck you drown out sorghum in Alva, but we achieved that. So yay us. Kinder asked, do we ever lose our enriched strips through weather? So Jimmy, yes, we have lost enriched strips, but it's still better than the rest of the field, which is the indication that we need. And that has been through rainfall. And so we can top it off and it works. Now you always have your enriched strips show up and I don't know what's going on with your crazy soil. But yeah, there's we have lost enriched strips, but we just bump it up. We have
Brian, I know it's something that we always talk about, and it's maybe advisable for this. What is your temperature moisture pattern that you're okay going straight UAN versus cutting it with water? That kind of conversation
for wheat.
For wheat, sorghum, what's wheat late or wheat mid-season and sorghum early season.
I stream on nitrogen on wheat until I get right past joining, and then I switch, and I don't put it on again until late, and then I cut it with water as a 50-50 dilution, and that's for a really late season boost. If I'm going up through joining, I'm just streaming it on. I'm going to take some burn, but to me, it's a lot like a graze. If we burn a little bit with nitrogen, it's kind of like getting a flash graze from cattle or geese or deer. And so as long as we don't destroy the crop, we're okay. But I have seen people kill a wheat crop with way too much nitrogen, way too hot of environment. And when it comes to sorghum, I'd prefer it to be streamed on, and I can't get enough on by cutting it, and so I'm just going to take some damage. I got a question for Dorivar if he's on there. I prepped him. Dorivar, you breezed through it, but give me a little rundown on the influence of nitrate and salinity on IDC in beans.
Yes, I think there's really a couple theories there. But high nitrate seems what happened is at the physiology in the plant level, and a lot of this work has been primarily on high value tree crops. If you look at our typical agronomy journal, you don't find a lot of these, but most of the work on this has been in high value crops. But essentially, if you have high nitrate uptake in the plant, that basically inhibited the conversion of iron 3 to iron 2 in the plant, in the soybean. That seems to be one of the theories. And that has to do with the availability of hydrons to convert the iron 3 to iron 2. So it's not uncommon that you'll see, if you do tissue tests, iron chlorosis soybeans actually end up to have very high iron, total iron in the leaves. But again, that's total iron. It's not really what the plant can use in the iron 2 form. And so that's something a little bit intriguing. Sometimes that you'll see if you do tissue tests, iron content come back pretty high, but you have iron chlorosis problem. So that's one theory. The other thing is that, and there have been a lot of work in Minnesota primarily, George Ream did quite a bit of that, is to basically use oats intercropping with soybeans. And the idea with that is to use some of the excess nitrate. But there's also the idea of oats being a strategy to basically release some chelates. The roots release some chelates in the soil, and that basically help the soybean to take up more iron. So a little bit of a combination of two approaches there. And so we do see quite a bit of this in Kansas as well. Like I say, one of the things you see that maybe nothing happened, and then 1 year, one thing that we saw in many cases is soybean after soybean, for multiple years, and nitrogen accumulation in those soils in many cases start to contribute to chlorosis as well. And so, yeah, that's one of the kind of quick overview, but again, it is very more physiology oriented, plant physiology, and very little work on this in our main crops, really.
Well, Brian, I'll have you and Dorvar, and Seth and Highland can jump in. I mean, just as end products in general, urease and nitrification inhibitors. What have you guys seen and the value of them? Why don't we bring it to voice what you guys are talking about?
I'll fill in real quick what I said in the chat. Dorivar can add in. For wheat denitrification inhibitors, for me, if you're going early, have little value unless the rain event happens shortly after. A lot of our denitrification inhibitors are not made to last an extended period of time when we have warm soils. They're built to go in as the soils are freezing to help hold, and they do well when it's cold. But if we're applying it in September and October when our soil temps are in the 70s, they don't last as long as you think they might. So we don't tend to have the same run with denitrification inhibitors holding out unless the leaching is happening right after application. We do have a timing study on denitrification inhibitors going out this year. We have it in 5 locations from basically Chickasha to Kansas. And we also have urease inhibitors. And we had the same in sorghum, but like I said, that was in the drown out spot. So, in north central Oklahoma and Alva, we were able to drown out sorghum.
So for us, nitrification inhibitors in winter, we haven't done much of that really for the same reasons that Brian mentioned. Most of our work tends to be mostly on corn. I think where we tend to see most of the leaching and denitrification problems in most of our soils. Now, one thing that we've done and we completed, actually just published early this year, is on volatilization of urea to addressing winter wheat, cold weather volatilization. And we kind of replicate what they done in Montana, and we were able to measure some level of volatilization. Still, it's not what we see is not significant. In my opinion, it's not significant enough to cause any significant yield impacts. But we are seeing some level of volatilization even with cold weather urea application. So that's something to think about. I guess in that case, urease inhibitor could maybe be a little bit more value than a nitrification inhibitor in winter wheat.
The people that, if you are having trouble with the CCA app and you can't get it to work, make sure to just email Brian after this, and he can make sure to get all the information if you have to do it after the fact. And Brian, what about the thiosol? Any comments beyond what you're having there on using it for increased efficiency?
So I've got it in UAN. I've got it in I've done thiosol. I've tried it as a sulfur source, and Dorvar does a lot of good sulfur work up in Kansas. I don't get any benefit nutrient wise from the sulfur because the majority of our soils have so much sulfur at depth. We go to that clay layer and we get a bunch of sulfur. Although I'm expecting any day now to have a sulfur response, I'm just not getting any. It's going to happen. I just don't know when. I'm not getting, the thiosol as a inhibitor is shown to work sometimes. It's not like a guaranteed. There's aspects of it that are going to help, but the consistency is quite low. So if I'm in a region that needs sulfur, dude, that sounds great. But if I don't, I've had no positive, when I put thiosol, there's been no positive return, and I've had a couple negative, and I think we've got some weird N to S ratio stuff that I'm trying to understand better.
Yeah, and I think the sulfur deficiency is getting close, Brian. There's some counties border with Oklahoma that we are seeing already, but you are right. I mean, it's been progressing for us also in Kansas, kind of starting the northeast part, and now we start to see more places. But and so we do get the value of the sulfur from the thiosulfate, and but also again, there's like Brian mentioned, there's a little bit of the value from volatilization standpoint, not as good as the MVPT products, of course, and so. Not a huge benefit there, but that's always, in some cases, maybe you'll see a little bit of a value. But if I will have issues or concern with volatilization, I'll rather use MVPT than thiosulfate, unless I need sulfur, of course, which again, in our case, is becoming more of a standard practice. And so in that case, you get the both benefits.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment on the sulfur soil test. I think Bradley showed deficiency on his report. But actually, to have an accurate assessment on sulfur supply from a soil, we recommend to take subsoil samples. If you just based on surface 6-inch, typically you're going to see a deficiency. However, if you add subsoil, I mean, in Oklahoma, we have not seen soils really deficient at all. So that's why a lot of Brian's field tests have not seen any responses to sulfur fertilizer. So well, that's a big difference. Although our report may say deficient, but that's because you did not take a subsoil sample.
Vaughn's wheat studies, that we had 30 locations every year from Texas to Kansas. His average 0 to 6-inch soil sample sulfate was in the single digits. His average 6 to 18-inch was 60 pounds. And so, Dane, we have a lot of 6 to 12-inch samples up in your country that showed 30 to 40 pounds just in that 6 to 12, where you have an increase in clay content. It tends to hold up there.
Yeah, we do see the same issue in Kansas. If you have a clay layer in some of the soils, it's very likely it's going to be accumulation of sulfur there. So that's a very good point. Really need to be looking at profile samples.
Brian, and maybe Dorvar can comment because he sees it. We're seeing our wheat fields be invaded, if you will, by cotton, soybean, and grain sorghum that have been historically just continual wheat systems. What do you think are some nutrients that some of our producers might start seeing issues with, and maybe never have looked at on a soil test that might need to look at in years to come as we are seeing those increased crop diversity?
In our case, we see a lot of changes, and basically what you're saying, wheat acres obviously going down, and a lot of that's being replaced by soybean. We have a lot of cotton also moving in the southwest part of the state. And so essentially the same thing we kind of talked already earlier. pH, both low and high, is a little bit more of an issue. You know, wheat is just very more tolerant crop. And so we do have, you know, even though we talk about high pH in my session, we do have spots that can be low pH even in western Kansas, and so those can become an issue. Legume soybean is more sensitive to those low pH, and on the other extreme we have the high pH problem as well. Potassium is kind of an interesting one for cotton. We have some sandy soils in Southwest. We traditionally consider those to be high K levels, but with the rate of uptake of K, we are starting to get some questions on that. You know, is there enough K even in those high testing K? So I think there's a little bit of some of those questions, and I think there was a good discussion this morning on that as well. But those are some of kind of the new things we see. Chloride is one that, you know, is more common for winter wheat for us, but we also see more in corn and sorghum as well. So maybe those are a little bit some of the changes we see. With sulfur, for sure, that's basically for most crops. We tend to see a response as well, but it's a tough one because of the sampling. Not all the soils are going to be responsive. What I see oftentimes is that, you know, guys, they're just going to put 20 pounds of sulfur and forget about it. And, you know, with the price of sulfur, maybe that's a good approach.
I'm sharing some work. This is this year's cotton harvest off of a Sandy Loam and Perkins cotton field that has a 145 ppm K. And you look at, so the first 5 here or the first 4 are pre-plant muriate of potash, and then Aspire, which is basically muriate of potash plus boron, put it into sandy soil. This is a 30-30 split, basically pre-plant and at pinhead square. And you see that split on both these cases added about 500 pounds of lint, even though we have enough, and the foliars didn't do anything. So significant increase. We're seeing 2 things. So we had some pH plots at a clay loam, or no, a silty loam field that had significant compaction and eliminated roots, along with the lumen toxicity. Had massive demand for potassium that needed to be over the top, even though we had a very high soil test. Soybeans too, double crop soybeans, seeing the need for potassium increase. And I think it's a root to shoot ratio where we don't have the roots that can support the biomass, because our double crop yields are not 12 or 15 bushel anymore. We got double crop yields of 40, 50, 60 bushel double crop. When you're planting that late, the plant puts more effort into going into reproductive than it does to establish roots. So fields that don't respond to potassium for full season beans are responding to potassium for double crop beans. And so I'm doing a lot of work on P and K on double crop soybeans because of those yields. But I agree with all that Dorvar said. K is something we need to pay attention to. I think it's a combination of growth factor, roots, and this plant uptake. Cotton can use 3 to 5 pounds of K per day during peak uptake, and soybean can use 1 to 3 pounds of K per day during peak uptake. That's a lot. If you're demanding a plant to do that and you don't have the root structure behind it, and you have a deficient soil, you're going to be short.
Brian, what's your critical level in Oklahoma for K?
125.
Yeah, so that would be considered optimum, that 145. Yep.
Kansas increased theirs recently in cotton. Katie just increased it 2 years ago.
Well, I am still a lot of discussion on sulfur, but I'm not seeing any more come in. If you do have any more questions, you know, feel free to text Brian or put them there in the chat. Brian, so on the you said that with the later application, when you delay that secondary application wheat, you get better main stems, smaller tillers. Was that right?
This is observation. We've not documented any of this, Joshua. So don't. I'm not doing tiller counts and stuff. But in a combine, I just feel like, you know, I've done this over 15 or 20 site years now, sitting in that combine. I feel like I've got a shorter shorter statured crop. I feel like I've got larger heads, but fewer of them, which tends to make me think my main tillers are producing more spikelets or getting a little bit bigger, but I don't have the tiller count underneath it that I do on those earlier fertilized. And so I think about sorghum, your sorghum, do you really want every sorghum plant to have 5 tillers?
Well, so my question comes more in wheat on if you are relying more on those main stems than the subsequent tillers. Do you think that would harm like the stress response from a late season freeze? Or obviously you didn't get that because we've had that since you've been doing this work. So is it just that it's so healthy that the frosts and the freeze are not as impactful, or where do you think you get that if you are getting a less tillers, more reliance on that main stem?
Heading date's delayed by a week. So if I'm a week later on this freeze, a lot of times I'm making through it. So how much does that play? I mean, there's a lot. I don't know the mechanisms. I said this at Cara the other day, Dover. I don't know why this stuff has happened physiologically. I honestly am at a loss on some of it, and so I'm searching for explanations. And that's what the research program is going to get into. I do have a question from Kendra on Gray's tweet. We do have significantly more data coming in, Jimmy, and that you've got to go you've got to have it for early growth. But I've seen if you have deficiencies showing up well after holostem, up almost to flag leaf, and you're grazing out, fertilize. We have had amazing recovery of applied nitrogen when we're going late on Gray's tweet when we have cowpox showing up.